All right, so are you ready for this? We're going deep, deep into the life of a man named James.
Buckle up.
Yeah, diaries, letters, we've got it all. And let me tell you, this is not your average love story.
Definitely not.
No, we're talking open relationships, personal growth, and a whole lot of soul searching.
It's pretty amazing, actually. I mean, it's not every day you get this kind of intimate look into someone's life, not just James either.
Right.
We hear from the women in his life, too, and that gives us, well, I think a much richer understanding of his relationships.
Yeah. And right off the bat, we see this unconventional dynamic between him and Lily. She's his long-term partner. And they're navigating this open relationship thing, exploring polyamory even.
Which, let's be honest, can be a pretty bumpy road,
For sure.
especially for Lily. You really see it in her diary entries, uh, this inner struggle with jealousy and, well, societal expectations.
It's like she's torn between wanting to support James and then, like, her own ideas about how relationships are supposed to be.
Yeah, you nailed it. It's like two opposing forces pulling at her.
And what's so interesting is her perspective changes over time.
It does.
It's not just about tolerating what James is doing. Eventually, she's like actively participating, even suggesting other women he could date.
I know, right? It really makes you think. What leads to that kind of acceptance? Is it really personal growth? Is it, I don't know, self-sacrifice? Or is it maybe a bit of both?
No, you'd think James has this like free pass to explore, right? But then he kind of flips the script.
He does.
Yeah. After all those years of supporting Lily's open explorations, he decides to declare his own need for sexual freedom.
Almost like what a role reversal.
Total role reversal. And suddenly Lily, who's seemingly made peace with their open relationship, well, she's confronted with her own boundaries and insecurities.
Which, is totally understandable.
Oh, absolutely. And her first reaction, hurt, resistance. It's like, hold on, my love and commitment are on pause while you go and pursue your own needs. But here's where things get interesting. They actually talk it out.
Communication is key.
Right. Instead of shutting down, she really engages with James in this like really complex negotiation.
It's fascinating. They talk about their fears, their expectations, and, well, what they're each willing to compromise on.
What strikes me is that James, even though he made this bold declaration, he's willing to listen.
Yeah.
He's willing to adapt. It's not just about him getting what he wants. He's really trying to find a way forward that, that works for both of them.
That's huge. That willingness to have those open, honest conversations, especially when you're challenging, traditional relationship norms, it shows respect
Yeah.
and a genuine desire to understand each other's needs, even if those needs seem to be, like, pulling in opposite directions.
Okay, so outwardly, James is pursuing sexual experiences with these other women,
Right.
but he's claiming it's not just about pleasure. He calls it practice.
Practice, huh? That's an interesting choice of words.
It is.
He's talking about overcoming past traumas, building his sexual confidence, and, just understanding himself in intimacy better.
Okay, but if that's the case, how does this practice actually look? Is it just racking up sexual experiences, or is there something, I don't know, something deeper going on?
Well, if you look beyond just his words and really examine what he does, it seems like he's trying to be deliberate. He's looking for connections with these women, whether they're emotional, intellectual, physical, or all of the above.
And we see that with Frida, right? And Wendy. Frida brings out this like playful, almost flirtatious side of James. But with Wendy, the connection feels deeper, like more intellectual, more emotionally intimate.
Yeah. So it suggests that his reasons for doing this are more complicated than just wanting physical gratification. You know what I mean?
I do.
He's drawn to different things and different women, and it seems like his interactions with each of them serve, well, different purposes in his journey.
Right. But we can't forget, James isn't just some single guy hopping from one fling to the next.
Right.
He's in this committed relationship with Lily, and his actions have real consequences.
They do. And we see that reflected in his diaries. You can tell he's wrestling with guilt, shame. He's worried about hurting Lily, about being seen as a manipulator, even while he's chasing his own desires.
It's that struggle, that tension between wanting freedom and being afraid to cause harm that makes his story so, I don't know, so gripping. He's not just some hedonist. He's a complicated guy grappling with his past, with societal expectations, and, well, just with the whole idea of love and commitment.
And then you add in his interest in this heart-to-heart protocol. It's this method for building emotional connections remotely. And it seems like, well, like a whole other dimension of his search for intimacy.
It is. It's fascinating how he contrasts that with his more physical explorations. Like he's seeking connection on all these different levels, not just through, typical romantic or sexual means. But what exactly is this heart-to-heart protocol, and how does it fit into his journey overall?
Well, that's where we're headed next. We'll unpack all the details of this practice and see how it affects James's relationships and, well, his whole idea of intimacy.
So James is a complex guy with complex motivations, that's for sure. But let's get back to this heart-to-heart protocol. What is it exactly, and how does it work?
I will imagine, like, connecting with someone
Mm,
deeply, emotionally, but you're not even in the same room.
okay.
That's basically the heart-to-heart protocol. It's based on this idea of remote viewing, where you're trying to um, perceive things about a distant place or a person using just your mind.
Whoa, okay, that sounds pretty out there. How does James explain this to someone who's like completely unfamiliar with it?
He describes it as tuning into another person's, like, energy field,
Okay.
focusing on their heart center, and then letting a connection form based on empathy and, like, shared intention. It's about creating this space for vulnerability and emotional intimacy, even when you're physically apart.
So he actually connects with someone, Anne, through this protocol.
He does.
What kind of relationship develops out of that kind of, I don't know, unconventional connection?
Well, it's interesting because with Anne, there's no physical element to the relationship.
It's purely emotional and spiritual. They share their deepest thoughts and feelings. They offer support and understanding, but in a way that goes beyond the limits of normal relationships.
So he's exploring these different dimensions of intimacy, like challenging this idea that connection only comes from physical touch or romantic love.
Yeah, exactly.
But how does this all play out? Alongside his relationship with Lily and his practice with these other women.
Right, that's the paradox, isn't
Yeah.
it? He's doing these things that seem, well, they seem contradictory. He's pursuing both physical and emotional intimacy, but in very different ways.
Makes you wonder, is he trying to compartmentalize those experiences?
Yeah.
Or is there a deeper connection between them?
Right.
And speaking of contradictions, we can't forget all the tension that comes up when James finally reveals his desire to openly date other women.
Yeah, after all those years of supporting Lily's exploration, it kind of feels like this power shift.
Yeah.
Like he's demanding equal freedom.
And Lily's reaction, I mean, it's so human, so relatable, hurt, betrayed, maybe even a little threatened,
Mm.
The foundation of their agreement, the thing she had seemingly come to terms with, it's like suddenly shaken.
So she's kind of forced to confront the reality of their arrangement, but in a whole new light. What were the main sticking points that came out during those negotiations?
Well, boundaries were a big one.
Okay.
I mean, Lily was willing to accept James dating other women, but she didn't want a complete free-for-all.
Makes sense.
She wanted some say in who those women were, maybe because she wanted to, I don't know, protect herself from feeling threatened or replaced.
So she's trying to navigate the situation that has no roadmap. There aren't any social norms or guidelines for this kind of unconventional relationship.
Exactly. And what's amazing is that they actually have these hard conversations.
Yeah.
There's one where they're actually discussing specific women James could approach, weighing the pros and cons, almost like it's a business transaction.
It's definitely unconventional. But it also shows a level of honesty and transparency that you don't always see in more traditional relationships.
Right.
They're being totally open, acknowledging their anxieties, their desires, and trying to find a way to make it work.
Yeah, it's refreshing in a way.
It is.
But even with these agreements, James doesn't exactly have smooth sailing.
Yeah.
He has setbacks, moments of doubt, and this constant struggle with his own shame and guilt.
Right.
We see that really clearly in the incident with Bibby
Right.
at the sex party.
Oh, yeah.
He gets caught up in the moment, has this casual encounter that, well, it ends up making him feel empty.
Disconnected.
Yeah.
So it's a reminder that even when you're pursuing sexual freedom, there can be unintended consequences. And it challenges this assumption that that just having more experiences will automatically lead to personal growth and healing.
It's like he hits a wall and realizes that real intimacy, the kind that really nourishes him, can't just be found through through physical encounters.
So how does he deal with these conflicting desires? On one hand, he's got the sexual experiences as practice, but then on the other hand, he's looking for deep, meaningful connection.
Yeah. That's the question we'll explore in the last part of our deep dive. We'll look at how his past has shaped him, the societal forces that influence his thinking,
Yeah.
and ultimately whether he finds a way to bring these seemingly separate parts of himself together.
We've seen James explore intimacy in like all these unconventional ways,
Hmm.
but he's always battling this internal conflict. What do you think is at the heart of that?
Well, societal norms for sure play a big role.
Yeah.
Remember how he pointed out that double standard, with older men and younger women?
Right.
He's very aware of that,
Yeah.
of those judgments, and the hypocrisy that comes with those kinds of relationships.
It's like he's pushing against those boundaries, right? Trying to redefine what's considered, I don't know, acceptable when it comes to age and desire. But it's not just external, is it?
Not at all. He's wrestling with internalized shame, too.
Yeah.
His upbringing, that strict religious background, it seems like it's had a real lasting impact on him. He mentions feeling this pressure to conform, to fit into this very specific mold, which obviously clashes with the way he's living now.
So he's embracing the freedom to explore his desires, but at the same time, he's got this ingrained guilt and judgment hanging over him.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why he's so worried about hurting Lily, about taking advantage of other women.
Could be. It's like he's on this tightrope,
Yeah.
trying to meet his needs while also minimizing the potential for harm, trying to balance those two opposing forces inside himself.
And it's interesting how his creative stuff, like his writing, it's almost like a safe space for him to process all these feelings.
Absolutely. He talks about being brutally honest in his writing,
Yeah.
Like he wants to expose the raw reality of desire and intimacy, even if it makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's like he's trying to break free from those societal constraints,
Mhm.
both the ones out there in the world and the ones inside his own head.
His book project seems especially important. Do we get any sense of what he's writing about specifically?
He doesn't get into specifics, but he does mention wanting to explore, the complexities of human connection,
Right.
the challenges of navigating non-monogamy, the way society pressures us to think about love and relationships. It seems like a very personal project for him, a way to make sense of his own experiences, and maybe even offer a different perspective on these things that are often considered taboo.
So, after going this deep into James's life, reading his diaries, his letters, seeing his relationships, his anxieties, his good times, his bad times, what do you think is the most valuable thing we can take away from his story?
I don't think it's about finding the right way to do relationships, or even about, the pros and cons of non-monogamy. It's about having the courage to be honest with yourself, to face your own desires, your own limitations, even when they go against what society tells you.
It's about realizing that personal growth is messy,
It is.
that you're going to stumble, you're going to make mistakes.
Absolutely.
But in the end, it's about becoming a more authentic version of yourself.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Mm-hmm.
James's story reminds us there's no one-size-fits-all approach to life or love or relationships. It's about finding what works for you while also being aware of how your choices affect others. It's about open communication, honesty, and challenging yourself, challenging the world around you.
And I think maybe the most important thing is remembering that we're all works in progress.
We are.
We're constantly evolving, learning, trying to figure things out as we go.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into James's world, I'm left with this question for you. How much are your own experiences with intimacy shaped by, by what society expects versus what you genuinely desire? What boundaries are you holding yourself back from exploring? And what can you do to live a more authentic, more fulfilling life? The answers, they're within you.
And that's what makes this whole deep dive so powerful. It's not just about one man's story. It reflects the universal human experience, that constant struggle to balance our desires and responsibilities, our individuality, and our need for connection. Thanks for joining us. Until next time.